Welcome back. Today we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to tie a bass popper. We're going to do a lot of deer hair work here. When I was a kid, I messed around with these a little bit. I tied them a decent amount. Didn't really know what the hell I was doing, but started tying them back here again, I don't know, about a month ago, and just messing around with different deer hair. And it's amazing, like the consistently working with this stuff makes your other deer hair work so much better. I just noticed that I was tying a couple of white girls the other day, and it was just like so simple working with it. There was no struggle or anything. This teaches you so many different techniques. Went through a few of the books and everything, just kind of getting some new tips, different ideas, as much as you can broaden out your tying repertoire, I guess would be the best way to put it. It helps so much working with things that you're uncomfortable with. I was never really great with poppers, but just within a couple of them, I mean, probably about a dozen, it really started to turn into something that was really looking pretty good. And then some Dahlberg divers and all of that. And Christy's been tying quite a few of them, and her deer hair work is really leaps and bounds above what the first one or two was, just within probably a dozen flies. It's amazing how fast you're able to pick up on this stuff and just work through it. And it, like I said before, it really helps on everything else through the rest of your tying, thread control and all of that. They're tough patterns to tie, especially when you start putting the designs and everything in there, but I don't know, it's just something fun to play around with, and you can just go just about any different color combination you want. So, like I said, we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to do this in a 3-part series. We're going to do the actual tying of it, we're going to do a trim, and then the finished portion of the fly. I may have to move around some camera angles. I'm probably going to talk a lot about different types of deer hair, which is funny because you ask anybody that really knows me, getting more than 2 words out of me is pretty tough, but for some reason when it comes to fishing or tying, I can just ramble all day long. It's just something that I absolutely enjoy and love talking about. So we'll get into what we're going to be doing here. We're going to start out with the deer hair. This is all deer belly hair. You can use body if you want. The belly is so much better for forming these poppers, the Dahlbergs, whatever it may be, frogs that you're tying, and it's a lot easier to manipulate your color breaks and everything with this. What you really are looking for, excuse me, what you're really looking for, this is going to wind up being a mess of a video, so just bear with me here. There's going to be materials everywhere, but you're looking for at least 1 inch of working material. You can see right there what we have. There's probably 1.5 inches minus some of the tips up there and everything. We typically cut the tips off of these. When you go getting into something like this, there's a 1/2 inch of hair altogether. It is absolutely miserable to work with, and it's tough, but there is a spot for this, and I'll explain that as I'm going through. If you find some shorter belly hair, save that for your dots that you're going to be making throughout your fly, and I'll explain that as I get going through it. But to start on this one, we have a Kona. This is an XSS, basically a B10S, right around along the same lines. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit heavier of a gauge wire, and it's the bend's a little bit different. But started tying on these flies, or on these hooks, and you know, overall I think they're a pretty solid hook. So I'm probably going to be tying on these a decent amount here, as opposed to the Gummies or the A-Rex. Just a little bit cheaper overall, but I really don't think you sacrifice much quality. So It's going to be a long video. I'm going to get into the tying here after a lengthy introduction to what we're doing. Like I said, Kona, this is an XSS. This is a 1/0. And what I want to do is I'm starting out with a 100. I'm just going to make our tail section. We're going to have some deer hair. We're going to have some marabou. We're going to have some flash. We're going to have some... Let me get that tied in there. We're going to have some hackle going in there as well. And we're just going to make a nice clean tail section. So what I'm going to do is take this, it's like a dull orange, maybe, I don't know, it's not quite a peach, maybe a dull orange bucktail here. And I just want to set this in. The biggest thing that you want to work with when you're tying your tails in, or when you're tying your back half, and I don't really necessarily know that you can call it a tail, or if you want to, I mean, that's the way to reference it, I guess. But when you're tying this in, you want as few thread wraps as possible to keep all of your material locked in place. So we're going to cut that bucktail at an angle, and I put a reference right here with my thread. I don't want anything going past that at all. Let me turn the light on there. I don't know if that light's going to aid or hinder this pattern, but I'll keep checking it. I may turn it off a few times throughout. But like I said, I don't want any material going past that. I want as few thread wraps as possible, and I definitely don't want to extend past that section right there if I can't avoid it at all. So there you go. We have just a little bit of bucktail going back. This is just going to be a little internal color between our deceiver style tail that we're going to throw in. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of flash here. This is a blue and copper, just Krystal flash. I have 3 or 4 strands, maybe 5, I don't know. I'm just going to double this up. And then typically how I tie my stuff in, I would go one down this side, one down the opposite, and then I would have a couple extra wraps. But that's going to add bulk to this. So what I'm going to do is just double this over and then go one right there, and then I'm going to separate these slightly. They don't have to be going perfectly down the sides. All I really want is a little bit of flash in there. And then I'm going to take all of these, I'm going to pull this up and cut it just short of my bucktail. And then you can kind of just spread those around. Once the water gets to it and everything, it's gonna disperse that flash pretty well for you. So there's what we're looking at right there with the flash. You can see it from the top view. And then what I want to do next is take in and tie these deceiver style tails, but I'm going to tie them in like I do when I tie the white girl. I'm going to, instead of tying them, and these are a little bit on the shorter side from what I would really prefer to tie in. I'm going to try and find something that'll be a little bit longer, but we're working with the end of this one. So like I was saying, I'm going to tie these in like I tie the white girl, meaning here's how the feathers are sitting. I'm going to turn them opposite of one another, and it's going to wind up sitting like that. And what that does is just going to create a little bit more motion in the water. It's going to flap around a little bit more. Let me get that off of there. And I just want to measure this out to where it's the length of my bucktail. There may be 1 or 2 stragglers on that bucktail that are going to be a little bit longer on this one, but typically, like I said, I like these to be just slightly longer than what I'm working with here, but this will work for this application. Just get a couple of wraps right over top of that, secure everything in place. And I don't think I mentioned we're starting off with a gel spun 100 for this back section here, we're going to use 200 for the rest of it, but we want to use as few wraps and have as less thread, or the least amount of thread buildup that you can get on this. So that's why we're going with the 100. And we're going to set this opposite, and we're just going to go 1, 2, get that nice and secure. Now you can see that we've got our bucktail, we've got these feathers going off to the side and everything. Everything looks nice and clean right there. The last thing that I want to do is I want to tie in a piece of Marabou, and you can go multicolor if you want. I'm just going to use one color on this, and it's going to match up sort of to the color of my bucktail. And I'm just going to peel this out, and I thought there was a piece that was busted up pretty bad there, but we're good. And I really only want about 2 or 3 wraps on this, so it doesn't have to be a perfect piece to palmer. Get that out of the way, and then 1, 2. Oh, I'm trying not to advance this too far forward. 2, 3. Just enough to get that secured right in place. And then, where did I put my Hackle pliers at? They're sitting around here somewhere, buried amongst all of this deer hair, I'm sure. There we go. Alright, so then I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to find a good section to catch this with on my pliers, and then make sure that my package side, and it's going to fall right out. It's going to fall right out. I'm making my best effort on this to keep my thread behind where I started it. If I creep forward a little bit, it's not the end of the world, but I don't want to go too far forward on that. There we go. We'll try that again, and then half hitch as well. We'll grab this, and I just want to make a couple of wraps right around this. Like I said, 2, maybe 3 wraps. What did I do there? I'm making a mess of this Marabou. Making a mess of it. I hope I have enough to grab there. Working around this hook point and everything. 1. Really making a mess out of this here. That feather's just not wanting to cooperate with me. So there we go. 1. Just kind of peel those fibers out of the way. 2. Just peel those out again. And I'm going to call that good right there. Just enough material just to break up that color a little bit. Just add a little bit of contrast to everything there. I got 1 or 2 trapped. Now you can see that we've got our Marabou going back there, and we still haven't advanced too far forward from where we originally put that. We're still clear. We're still sitting right about our hook point. Now I'm just going to take and whip finish this and we're gonna get our 200 in here. If you get a little bit of extra bulk right here toward the back, it's not the end of the world. It's still going, you're still gonna be able to spin your deer hair if you need to. It's just easier if you're working on a slick hook. So I'm gonna take this 200 out now, and I'm just gonna go over the top of this, make everything nice and clean. We have a nice clear section to work with right there. So you can see what we're working. Let me try to shut that off again. I don't know which one's better. I think I'm gonna go with that. Maybe during editing I can brighten stuff up if I need to here and there, but get rid of all that junk. Alright, so what I'm going to do on the bottom of this one is I'm going to use a yellow chartreuse for the bottom of this fly. Now when I pick this up, you'll be able to see this here. I want to cut as close to this hide as I can possibly get, because every little bit that you're able to work with on this deer hair is going to make a difference. It's going to make things so much easier if you're able to lengthen out this material as much as possible. So like I was saying, this is going to be our bottom, and we did switch over to the 200. I just want to catch this. I'm going to have a little bit of a collar going back into my tail. I'm already not liking how this is sitting for me. This is borderline too short, especially for this back piece. But there we go. We're going to set that in. We're going to go 1, 2 right on top. We're going to take a third wrap and then just work this right to the bottom with our thread. So you can see I just kind of walk that right along the side of the hook, and then it's opening up all of this bottom right here. I'll turn this so you can see that I've got a very clean section that I'm working with. And before I do anything, before I pull down on this, I just want to take a little bit of zap, and I'm going to put a drop right on top of those thread wraps that I have right there. Not getting into the deer hair at all. It's not going all through that. I just want it right on the right on the thread wraps and the hook, and then I'm going to pull down and flare this stuff out. Now you can see I still have a nice clean platform that I'm going to tie my top section on right there. Everything's still nice and clean. Now I'm going to go to just a straight chartreuse, and this is another one that's borderline too short, but we're going to make it work. So now I'm going to grab just about the same amount that I used for the yellow chartreuse, and then I'm just going to clean this up. Sometimes if you run your comb through your hair just right like that, it's going to get rid of some of that fuzz, and it's not going to come out as uneven when you run it through the comb. It just knocks some of that loose stuff out, and then when you run it through the comb, you're not grabbing all of that with the individual tines, I guess you would call it, on that comb. So now I'm going to set this right on the top. We're going to use those tips. They're going to stay on there. And when you tie this top section, you get that first wrap right around just like that. And then I'm going to switch probably to the other camera. I want this running perpendicular to my hook. So I start like this, I turn my hand around, and my thread is going perpendicular and then straight down. I get 2 wraps, pull that tight, And there you can see it flare out. Everything looks pretty good right there. We've got a nice clear section. We've got good coverage on the top and the bottom for the chartreuse. Not sure I'm going to like that back view too awful much. That's obnoxious is what that is. Alright, so now we're going to start making some designs throughout this deer hair, or throughout the body with our deer hair, I should say. And I'm going to take, this is just some Kelly green, and I'm going to take a little bit less than what I used for the chartreuse. Once again, cutting as close to the hide as possible. And we're just going to make some rings going up throughout the entirety of this popper. I'm not cutting the tips off on this one. I'm going to let the tips be just for this one. Measure that out. We're pretty close to what we want. Now I'm going to take and just put my scissors right where I want this material to go. And then I'm going to set that right on the top. Once again, taking my thread here and work with as little thread as possible. That way you're not catching extra fibers from either underneath or on the top. And then just kind of shake your thread as you go through. 1, 2 wraps, pull that down tight, and flare that. So now we're still going to stack 2 colors on top of this before we go any further. Just make sure that your chartreuse and your green are centered up with the eye of your hook right here. Now we're going to go into a yellow. And I'm going to take even less on this yellow than what I used with the green. And I'm going to cut these tips off. I'm not worried about the tips going back into that tail for the collar here. They don't look too bad actually. We'll leave those on. Same thing again, find your center section and then separate everything with your scissors. And then I just want to go right around here, running perpendicular. Again, just kind of shimmy your thread right through there. 1 capture wrap and then 1 tight wrap, and then pull down and it'll flare that out, and we're making a circle right through there. Center up that section again, run your scissors right through it, and then we're just going to grab a little bit of orange here. And this is where I was saying, if you have some short hair, you can get away with doing this. It's still a pain in the ass to work with, but you're not going to be using your best hair for something that's just going to have, essentially be just a little dot on your fly when it's all said and done. Using even less than I did with the yellow, I'm going to set that right on the top, separate it with my scissors, and then same thing, work this right through. I've got some material that's trying to get trapped in there. Just kind of shimmy that through. I'm not trapping anything. Go 1, and 2. I got 1 or 2 hairs right there that got trapped, but they're out of the way now. Pinch this on the side and then pull straight down, and you'll feel this, you'll feel your thread just kind of sink into that hook. Once you know, that'll let you know that you've pulled tight enough, you have good security all the way through there. And then the last thing that you want to do before you move forward on this is, once again, go back to your eye. Make sure that right here's the center of my eye. Going straight back, I should cut right through that orange. If you have to adjust it a little bit here and there, it's not a big deal. If you have to turn it, you know, half of a hook length, it's probably not going to work out too favorably for you. Or if you have to turn it halfway around the hook, it's probably not going to work out too well. So now I just peel all of this stuff back with my fingers, and I want to make just some really short, if I trap a fiber or two, I'm not too worried about it. I just want to make some really short, tight wraps on that, and then go back to the zap. I don't want a ton through here. I just want just enough to touch up my thread, get it on the hook. And then I'm going to grab a packer. You don't need to really push this first one back all that much. Make sure you grab your thread and everything. Just kind of pack that back. Hold it for a second and then release. Don't hold it there too long. You're going to wind up ripping a bunch of hair back out of there. If you're doing these two chartreuse colors, and I got deer hair everywhere already. If you're doing these two chartreuse colors like I'm doing, I don't get too awful picky if I have a little bit bleeding. If, say, the regular chartreuse bleeds into the yellow chartreuse, I don't get too worried about it if it bleeds into the bottom or vice versa. I kind of like that little breakup. But what I don't like is if I'm using contrasting colors. If I'm doing like a black and a white, I want that white to be nice and clean throughout the entirety. So this is a good place to practice where you have colors that aren't so contrasting, and it'll allow you to get used to working with that and not letting one bleed into the other. But like I said, in this situation, I actually prefer the two to bleed in. It just has a neat little look to it. But however you want to work it, it's up to you. I mean, it'll all depend on what you like or how you like your fly to look, but I try to keep them as separate as possible most times. There are other times where I'll do it deliberately. I'll get a few fibers to run into the other color, especially if it's like a red on black or something like that. But now we're going back to the bottom here, and from here on out we're going to be cutting the tips off on this material. So just grab this in your left hand if you're a right-handed tyer, vice versa if not. And then you want to grab this bundle as close to the back as possible, because the tendency is when you tie this in and you lay everything like this on the hook, the tendency is you're going to be catching more material on the back, and it's going to wind up being shorter. So I try and get as close to the center as possible while not trapping anything. Peeling all the material back with my left hand from the previous stacks, and I'm just getting this yellow in there. That's the only thing that I'm getting. There's 2 wraps, and then I work that down to the bottom. You can see it spun around on me there, and I have just the yellow on the bottom there. It's a little bit heavier on one side than the other. Just move that around with our hands, and then I want to pull that down, and you can see we've got another nice clean platform to tie on right there. We've got all of our yellow chartreuse sitting right there, and I've got a nice clean section to tie this on, or to tie the rest of my colors on. We're going to wind up with 4 more stacks on the top, just the way we did on the back. Get a little bit of glue on there. It's going to go from the thread onto the hook and everything. It's just going to give you a little bit of extra security in the center. Back to the chartreuse. We're going to take this as always, getting as close as possible to that hide. Just clean out that thread, or clean out that hair, and then rotate it in your fingers to where it spreads out like that, and then just run it right through the comb. Cleaning out as much of that garbage as possible. Transfer hands, cut the tips. Now, we're using the exact same thread path that we used for the yellow chartreuse. Grabbing that bundle as close as you can to the center. One wrap around. One wrap on top of your capture wrap. Pinch this right in the center and pull straight down. We've got good yellow coverage on the bottom. Everything's looking clean right there. Back to the Kelly green, taking a little bit less. Each stack you move up, you're taking a little bit less as you go, so the yellow's going to be less than the green, the orange even less than the yellow. And we're going to work this through, same as always, cleaning this out. And then transfer hands, cut the tips. Just even that out a little bit. Find your center. Go with the green right over the top. Same as before. Shimmy your thread through there. And then perpendicular. Boom. Work with as little thread as possible out of your bobbin too. Perpendicular once again. Pull this down, make sure that everything's sitting how you want it, and then tighten that up, and you can just feel that sink down into the hook. We're still looking good for our center. Just continually check that. Continually check that your colors aren't going one way or the other on you. It may not look like a lot when it's sitting like this. Once you start trimming and you really get down to where the hair is, it becomes very apparent if you have something off. Even if it looks just absolutely perfect sitting like this, there's still been times where I've trimmed it and I can see it's just off a little bit. So just continually watch that. It's really tough to get it when you're doing 3 stacks back like that. It's really tough to get it perfect, but I mean, if you keep at it and you're mindful of where you're at with your fly, you can get it done. You have to continually check on it. So on to our yellow. Like I said before, even less than what we were using on the green. Center up your green with your scissors. Move your yellow in. Shorten up your thread as much as possible. One wrap around. Boom. One wrap on top of your capture. Run that perpendicular. And then after everything's sitting how you want it, just pull down tight and you'll see that circle start to appear right there. Check it again with your back section right there. Everything's lined up, and we're going to go back to our orange. Taking even less than we did with the yellow. Grab a little bit of orange here. Just spread that around. Probably don't even have to run that through the comb. We have so little. And then just dust your tips off. Find the center of your yellow, mark that out with your scissors, set that orange in, and then same thing as before. 1, 2, and then just pull straight down. There we have it. Everything's looking clean right now, And when you peel all of this stuff back, you're going to see that there's not a whole lot of thread, or there's not a whole lot of hook left. We may be looking at about half of it right now, and that chartreuse is just a little bit too short. Just a little bit. We're going to make it work, but it is just a shade on the short side. I want to check this again with my eye now that it's a little bit more visible. Make sure that my front and my back are lining up, and then I'm going to clear this stuff out, just pushing that back slightly. I want to shorten up my thread and then make a few tight wraps right against that thread, or right against that hair. Back to our zap. I just want to touch that thread up just slightly. I don't really worry about half hitching. You can if you want. I really don't half hitch too much on this. I get my thread right up against the hair, and then I just take and throw a little bit of zap on that, and I push back with that packer again, get everything nice and clean. Don't sit there too awful long. And you can see we still have about half of our hook to work with here. I'm going to advance my thread just slightly forward. I don't want to be right up against all of that hair. There's a couple in there I wanted to get out, but it looks pretty good overall. So like I said, I didn't want to be right up against that hair with my thread. I want a little bit of room to be able to maneuver around everything. I'm going to take, once again, about the same amount of yellow chartreuse that I used on the bottom. Just dust this up a little bit before you run it through the comb. Transfer hands, cut off your tips. Now I want to even this stuff up a little bit. The back section is what I'm really worried about, or the hide section, I should say. I want that as even as possible when I'm working with it. I wind up dropping a little bit here because I grabbed quite a bit of hair. I got deer hair flying all over the place and I haven't trimmed the dang thing yet. So there we go again. We've got everything how we want it. We've got the yellow chartreuse from the previous stack out of our way with our ring and middle finger, working as little thread through there as possible, not catching any of that green or straight chartreuse. I've got one or two fibers in there that are trapped. Just loosen those up. I got 3 wraps around there, none of it's tight yet, and I'm just going to walk that to the bottom with my thread. You can see how everything walked there for me. And then I'm just going to pull tight and then clear this stuff out with my scissors. Once again, I'm going to have a nice clean platform to tie on. Minus one hair that I got trapped right there. But everything's looking pretty solid right there. Again, I'm going to go back to the zap. I'm just going to touch that up. Just let that set right there. Hold that for a second. Just really let that sink in. Clear out a spot for my chartreuse to start the top with. Just want to make couple of cuts right through there. Cam's starting to get a little rambunctious. Get all of this stuff out of the top. We're just repeating the same step that we did for the first two. Cut off the tips. We're going to transfer hands and set this right on the top. Same thread path as the yellow chartreuse. One wrap around, clear. One wrap around, and we haven't pulled anything down tight yet. We just have we have one good capture wrap, and then our second one is going to be our anchor wrap. Just pull that down tight, let it sink in. We're nice and clear again. Now we're going back to the Kelly green, yellow, and orange. So again, go to the Kelly green, a little bit less than you used with the chartreuse. And I can already tell that editing this thing is going to be a pain in the ass, because I checked my monitor a few times and my arm's all over the place, so I'm going to have to switch camera angles. I should really have one above, but I don't have enough cameras to do that, so maybe one of these days we'll pick up another one, get a little bit more detailed on this deer hair work. So again, shorten up your thread, just shimmy it right through, go perpendicular to the hook, shorten up your thread, shimmy it through, perpendicular, 1-2 wraps, and then pull down tight. It's just going to flare that up. There's a nice little circle that we have right there. Check in the center of your circle with the back two that you already have tied in, and then also with the eye of your hook. Back to the yellow, taking less than what we did with the green. And we're going to clean this up again. Nothing really new in this process. This is just really repetitive, but controlling your thread, controlling your deer hair is the most important part of this. It's not like it's so complex to where you have all of these different steps in it, but the control and keeping the orientation on your fly is what'll make or break this process. There's nothing really complex about what we're doing. It's just being able to control your material. So there's the 1-2. Shimmy that right through there again. Run that perpendicular and then pull down tight. It's going to sink in. Spread that initially out with your scissors. And then back to this just tiny orange. I'll see about doing this. Right now we're running at about 30 minutes, I think. I may do this in one straight shot, but it's likely going to wind up being a 3-part because, like I said, the edit is going to be a mess on this thing. Right here, center it up again. Shorten up your thread. Work it right through. I'm starting to catch. There we go. We're clear. Bring that around. 1, 2, and pull straight down. You're going to feel that just grab once it gets through all of that deer hair. Now, just move that back with your thumb and your pointer for now. Get 1 or 2 wraps in the front of that, and it looks like there's absolutely nothing left to work with. We're still going to get 1 more wrap in here. We're going to spin a full piece of orange in front of everything. You look with this packer, as I push that back, you can see that there's probably a good 1/4 of an inch or better to work with. Now granted, we're not going to have all of that because it's gonna walk forward on us a little bit, but just get a few good wraps right in front of everything. And then once again, I'm going to go back to the zap. Just set that right on there. And then push that back as much as you can. 1, 2, let it go. And then just check your orientation again. Orange is going all the way back. It's nice and even for the most part. You can't see that back one because that green's so thick. But they're all pretty well lined up. That one can shift just slightly. Right there. Then like I said, we're pushing all of this stuff back. And making just enough room here to where you can get a few solid wraps in front of that. Now, if you go trying to use this really short orange, you're gonna, one, probably ruin the fly. You're gonna get frustrated as hell. Like I said, that short hair you can use for these dots up top. When it comes to spinning a hair for this front section like we're going to do, you want to find the absolute longest stuff possible. It's just so much easier to work with, and this is going to be the tallest portion of your fly as well. This front section is going to wind up being, I don't know, maybe just shy of a $50 in width, or in circumference at the front. So if you go trying to use that short hair, you're never going to get this popper that you're after. And then when you do try to start trimming it and everything, it's going to be so slender at the back that it's just going to be a little pencil going through the water there. So we have a generous clump of orange here. What we're going to try to do, and probably 60% of the time it's successful, is we're going to try and make a complete spin around this. And I know when you look at it and it's like, man, there's hardly anything left there. We're still going to try and make a complete spin. So I have all of my hair out of the way. I'm going to go one, using as little thread as possible. There's 2. Let me get a 3rd. And then we're just going to make a spin. It got a little heavier on one side than it did the other, so what I'm going to do is just walk this through with my thread going up to, it's kind of a hybrid spin stack. Like if you've watched Andreas do some of his deer hair work, I've done it once or twice on some white girls where it's just a single color the entirety of the head. I'll do that hybrid spin stack. Take a look in the front of this, and it's just about even throughout the entirety. I'll try to spin this. I have this vise clamped down really tight right now, but there you go. We have pretty good orange coverage throughout the entirety of that fly. Could probably even get a little bit more hair in there, to be quite honest. I might try and pack that back because that eye's pretty well exposed. I think I could get a little bit more hair in there. And that's the key to these poppers, to any deer hair work that you're doing where you're trying to get designs and shapes and everything into it. You want as much dang hair as you can fit on that hook. You want it on that body. I don't think I'm going to get too cute on this and try and get any more on there because I'm sitting right at the eye. I might be able to get a little bit on the top. Why not? We'll get cute with it. We'll try and fit a little bit more on there. Why not? The more hair that you're able to get in this front, it's going to compress your back even more, and it's going to make those designs pop that much more. So, against my better judgment, I'm going to try and do a hybrid spin stack again. We're going to go one wrap around, and this is the toughest part right here. It's catching all of that and staying behind that eye. I've got a good secure wrap right there. I'm not going to be able to spin this at all, but we're going to do that hybrid spin stack again. And we've got good material throughout. Our eye's still nice and clear. Trying my best not to block that at all. Now, this is a little trick right here. When you get down to the bottom of this, or when you get down to the end of this fly, I'm just going to find a piece of plastic here. It can be a little difficult to whip finish this and still control all of your materials. Not so much a big deal when you're using just a straight color for the front like we're doing on this one, but if you have a design that you're working in the front, it makes it a lot easier if you have some plastic that you can wrap around everything. I think it was Andreas that I was watching. He used, it looked to be a Pringles lid. That'll work really well, or this will do the trick here. I'm just going to take some plastic just from an old package of material there, and then I'm going to cut a slit right down the center. Just about to the halfway point right there is what we're looking at. I'm going to work this right over the top. I'm going to find that center section right over the top, and then I'm going to just fold this stuff around. I'm going to work my thread right through that. Now we have a nice clean section to tie with. You're probably going to catch a little bit of that plastic, but it's a hell of a lot easier. We didn't catch any of it there. It's a hell of a lot easier doing that than it is fighting this thing the entire way, trying to get all of that stuff out of your way and not trapping a bunch of deer hair. So now what we're going to do is finish this off, and I saw this in Pat Cohen's book, and it took the poppers from average at best to looking like something that's carved out of cork. It really is. And there's a really simple trick on this. You're going to take a little bit of wax paper, and you're going to take a piece of plastic, cut a piece of hole in that plastic, right like we have right there, and some Loon soft head, or you can use Softex, whatever it is that you like to work with. Go ahead and take that stuff. Or if you want to do head cement as well, as long as it dries clear, you'll be fine. This soft head works pretty good. Before I get to that, I want to cut just a piece of wax paper about the same size as my square that I have for the plastic. You can use a CD case. They're a little bit brittle in my opinion. What I like the best is the plastic that the flies come in from the shop. It's a little pliable, it's easy to work with, you don't have to worry about it splintering on you or anything either. And then I'm going to take this wax paper right in the center. I'm just going to push that through just to where the eye of my hook is exposed, just like that right there. I'm going to peel this back off, and then I'm going to put this soft head all the way around, getting good coverage throughout. And I just want this to sit all the way around on this fly. I usually give it about 2 coats. I'll work entirely around that fly, around the head of it. Once I feel that I have good coverage, I'm going to grab a little bit more here. I'm going to start on that bottom section, or it's the top, I'm looking at it, it's the bottom. And then just work this all the way through here. Now that you have that, just set this stuff off to the side. You're not going to need it anymore. Go back to your wax paper. Throw your wax paper over the top. You can see we've got pretty good coverage on that right there. And then take your plastic and run your plastic right over that. And I kind of angle it down just a little bit. I like it to be, you know, maybe at a 10-15 degree angle. Turn that right there, and that gives it that kind of popper head that you're going to be after. So now with this, I take this off to the side. I usually let this sit for, at a minimum, an hour. I've found probably an hour and a half to 2 hours is best, honestly, because it just firms up a little bit more, and it's a lot easier to work with. So what I typically do is I tie these in bulk. I'll tie like 5 or 6 of them, and once I get done tying like the 5th one, obviously my first one is more than dry, and then after I take all the time to trim it and everything, by the time I get to the 5th, everything's ready to go. So, oh my goodness, I got deer hair everywhere. We're gonna take just a little break on this one. I'm not gonna obviously wait. I tied one before, same color and everything, but then we're gonna take a break on this one, and then I'm gonna come back and restart it, and we'll go from there.